is Reality Bytes, in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 5th of December 2013. My goodness, it'll soon be Christmas. Oh, the joys. We've got Christina England with us today from backtruth.com. I think somebody in the chat box mentioned Christina a few weeks ago, so we got her on. And I should mention also that next week we'll have Bill Still. I think somebody else asked in the chat box there earlier, a couple of weeks ago again, for Bill Still. So we've got him coming on next week. Christina, welcome to the broadcast. And I'll just mention that I met Christina once. She was kind enough to give me one of her books on, I think it was the Shaken Baby Syndrome book.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, as I normally do with guests, I get them to introduce themselves but explain how they got into the specific field of interest that they're involved in your case, vaccines. So if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself and say how you became interested in this topic.
Well, thank you for having me. My name's Christina England and I'm a journalist. I work mainly on VacTruth, but I've had articles printed all over the place, and I've also recently been accepted for a medical journal that's going to be shown to nurses and doctors to teach them in medical school, apparently in universities, on adverse reactions to vaccines. I came into it in a rather weird way. I'm a single woman, and I adopted two disabled boys, one of 3 and one of 4. And the children were disabled when I adopted them. I knew they were disabled. I'd asked for disabled children because I'd always worked with disabled children. And so I knew what I was getting into, at least I thought I did. Daniel he was the older one of the two. I adopted them separately. Daniel had lots and lots of problems, including ADHD and various other things, but he was diagnosed as globally developmental delay, which is the sort of catchphrase for anything going, especially social services tend to like this one in fostering and adoption. It's just global delay. Oh, they'll improve, they'll get better because, it's just a matter of love and time and patience, and attachment disorders, another one they use. And unfortunately, Daniel didn't improve. In fact, he got worse. He was very difficult to control. His behaviour was bizarre. He was obsessive. He was compulsive. He would do weird things. He had no empathy, no sympathy for others at all. He was a very, very difficult boy to look after. And I tried to get help. And the more I tried to get help, the more I was fought and told that, that I was a first-time mum, that I would get used to it. They just put me off, excuse after excuse. Well, when I adopted the second one, similar thing happened. The second boy had even more problems, but he did have a diagnosis of microcephaly, which is a small brain, small head. His brain hadn't actually grown properly, so there was kind of a little excuse for why he was so delayed. But he was very, very delayed. He wasn't walking. He certainly wasn't talking. He sort of was walking like a toddler around furniture. He was extremely wobbly on his feet. He had lots and lots and lots of problems. And as soon as I met him, I knew he was autistic. I'd worked with autistic children, and I'd specifically asked not to have autistic children, but both ended up as being autistic. I tried and tried and tried to get help and education for them, as you do, as parents do. And the more I tried to get help, and the more I tried to get, especially in the medical areas, because they had some medical problems as well. Nicholas had turned out, the younger one had turned out to have asthma and epilepsy and various other things as well. And he was seeing so many different doctors about so many different things, including growth problems and curvature of the spine. It just went on and on. And Daniel, the older one of the two, he was being seen because he was failure to thrive. He was exceptionally thin. He had diarrhea the whole time, stomach pains, doubled up in pain. And the more I tried to get help and the more I tried to fight for their needs, the more I got told that I was over anxious, that I was, a manipulative mother, and you name it, I was called it. Eventually, I got accused of Munchausen's by proxy. And during that time that I got accused of making up all the disorders that they came with before I ever met them, I met a wonderful lady named Lisa Blakemore Brown, a psychologist, and she assessed both boys, found them both to be autistic and both have a combination of problems. Nicholas particularly had lots and lots of problems. He was straightforward autistic, whereas Daniel was Asperger's. They both had ADHD. Nicholas, the younger, had dyspraxia, which is sort of clumsiness and various things. And Daniel had obsessive disorder, and he also was diagnosed as having extreme behaviour problems. And so the older one, on his adoption records, I hadn't noticed this, but then I wasn't looking for it. It did say that after the MMR, that's when his real problems began. He had the diarrhea from the moment he had the MMR, and it had never gone away. Only I didn't really look at that because it was a foster carer diary, and it was all in her handwriting. But if you followed it carefully, it did show a pattern of events that happened after each MMR, and particularly the one when he was 4, because I got him after he was 4. He was 4.5, and it was that alerted her, and she said, this child's vaccine damaged. And she said, I know all about vaccines, and it was her that really taught me a lot of what I know today. However, I've since found out an awful lot more, and what I was finding out was really, really frightening. But because I had this threat against me, and that I could lose the boys and everything else, I mean, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have kept the boys. They were going to take them back and put them back into foster care. However, I did keep them. I didn't lose them at any time. I had 4 case conferences. I went through the mill. I really, really suffered. I was told that I had hearing aids on the youngest to make him look disabled. I put T-shirts with pictures on the older one because it made him look disabled. Whatever I did and had done was wrong. It was just catalogue of things that I'd done wrong, apparently. And that kind of Lisa told me about various papers and things she'd written. And it led me into sort of what I'm doing today, because during the time I was accused, when I'd actually got cleared and all the sort of accusations were cleared off my records, he said to me, the guy at the head of Home and Social Services said to me, don't you ever go to the media, because if you ever go to the media and say mistakes were made, because mistakes were made in your case, records weren't read. He said, if you ever tell anybody that, he said, watch your back and we'll have those kids. And I said, are you threatening me? So he said, no, I'm just telling you. And of course, I didn't have it on tape. And of course, it was a one-to-one meeting. That was one of the ones that I went to on my own. Lisa usually accompanied, but she couldn't come at that time. And he took the advantage of threatening me at that particular point. So over the years, as the boys got older, and I always liked writing, I was always very, very good at writing, and I'd had things printed right from an early age. I think the first piece I ever had printed was when I was 6, and it was a poem I wrote. And the more I went through and learned about vaccines, and the more I researched myself, I kind of decided when the boys were old enough that I would do something about what I knew, and I'd expose everything. And of course, Lisa Blakemore Brown was going through the mill because she, like Wakefield and like Jane Donegan and various other people that we know, that Rebecca Carley, many really good doctors and psychologists, and anybody that spoke out about particularly the MMR, but that vaccines in general, really lost everything. They would threaten them, they would call them paranoid, whatever. She was going through this as well, and I promised her that I would expose the truth. I'd find out, I'd get to the bottom and I'd expose it. But how does one expose it? I was just a mum. And when the boys got to being sort of adults, I decided that I was going to train to be a journalist, because I thought, well, he said don't go to the media. He never said become the media. And I thought that was my best weapon of, getting back. And I wanted to expose what I knew and expose the truth, and that's what I'm doing today. And that's how I got into it, really.
Okay, that's a fairly detailed description, but yeah, I mean, it gives people an idea of I've always been a great believer that people wouldn't really stand up and do something about something until it happened to them, until something actually happens to them in their own personal life, and that seems to be your experience, and mine to a degree as well. I got a question there just before it goes off the screen. I'll ask you this. I mean, it's kind of slightly off the topic you're talking about, but I said, ask Christina about removing consent to sharing of medical information by GP practices. Is it possible to educate health workers at grassroots level? I've looked and they looked at me like I was an idiot.
Yeah, I think you can, but it's very difficult because they don't want to know. Medical professionals tend to think, well, the education's been dumbed down, and I'm afraid the people at medical school have been taught to think a certain way, and they don't like anybody to challenge that. And so that is where the problem is. That's where the problem starts, because no matter what you say, they will come back at I've got a very good example. My oldest son hurt his finger. He cut it on a skateboard, and we took him in to have it dressed in the hospital and have some stitches. And they said, "Oh, you've got to have a tetanus vaccine." So my son said, "No, I'm not having a vaccine." And he said, "But you've got to have a tetanus vaccine." And I was with him, and I said, "Excuse me?" So he said, "Well, it's for your safety." And I didn't actually say anything at this point, because Daniel turned around and he said, "Well, I don't believe that it is particularly safe. There's a lot of adverse reactions, and for somebody that's autistic, he was coming out with really good stuff." And I thought, just stand back, let him get on with it, because he's an adult. So he said to him, and anyway, he said, "My mum writes on this all the time. She knows what she's talking about." And he looked at me and he sort of said, "Well, I've just done a lecture on it." So he turns around and he says, "Well, my mum did a couple of weeks back, actually, in front of 100 doctors." And that was actually true. I'd just come and I did a speech at a conference in Harley Street. And so this doctor obviously was very, very put out, and he tried to sort of tell Daniel that he was risking his health and everything else, and that he really should have this vaccine. So Daniel, he said, "Well, I've written loads of papers on this particular subject. I know all about the DPT and the tetanus vaccine." So Daniel turns around and says, "Well, so my mum wrote a book." So it was really quite amusing. And then he turned around and he said, "Well, you should really have this vaccine." And Daniel turns around and says, "Look, mate, I'll take a rain check on that." And he walked out. So, he wasn't having any of it. He really wasn't.
I had a similar experience with a doctor on Irish radio when I lived over there. And he was Jim McDade. He was at one time he was the campaigned the anti-drink driving thing, and he drove up the wrong side of the motorway, drunk out his skull one day, and got caught for it. But of course, nothing happened to him. But he was on the radio, and he was talking about the HPV vaccine. I just phoned this. I just want to question Mr. McDade on his knowledge of this, as they were pushing it in the Irish Parliament for everybody to get it. And I said to him, "How many strains of the HPV virus are?" He said, "Oh, I don't know, 40 or 50 or so." I said, "Well, there's over 100. I says, "How many is this vaccine supposed to prevent?" He says, "Well, I'm not really sure, but a fairly large number." I said, "It's only about 3 or 4 at max."
Cerverax is only 2.
2, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And he said, and his first words after that was to the presenter was, "This is dangerous having this man on the radio talking like this." And this is a guy who'd driven up the wrong side of the motorway drunk. So everybody knew it. So I just left that hanging in the air. I thought, what a stupid thing to say. But anyway, that shows you the contempt that the medical profession and the arrogance that they feel that they're far superior in knowledge and experience that we could ever be. And he said to me, I think, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, how do you understand about this stuff? And I just said to him, "I'm perfectly capable of reading and understanding the same books you were given at medical college." I said, "Don't insult my intelligence." That was it. Yeah. But anyway, moving on. HPV. We'll stick with that actually, because you had an article there. I brought it up earlier. I'll just find it. HPV vaccines can kill, and they do. You wrote that. I'm not sure I'm not got a date on that actually.
Quite a while ago.
Quite a while
I do
ago.
remember
Okay.
it. Yeah, I saw it this morning. I was looking on Vac Truth for something, and I saw it flip past it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the statistics on here in America, we've got deaths 140, disabled 952, did not recover 6,032, abnormal pap smear 531, cervical dysplasia 214, cervical cancer. They actually got cervical cancer 64.
Yeah, that's right.
Life-threatening 562, emergency visits 10,557, hospitalised 3,065, extended hospital stay, and it goes on and on and on. Adverse effects 30,352. Yeah, we're told it's safe. As with all vaccines. But I mean, in particular, the HPV. We're now being told that boys have to get it. I don't know any boys who have a cervix, unless they're one of those kind of strange lady boys from the Philippines. But
probably, yeah.
Possibly.
I mean, yeah. With they're saying that the women can pass it on to the boys, and give them penile cancer, which is ridiculous. But they're also saying that it can be given to the boys, and the boys will go on and have sex with somebody else and pass it on, because it's a sexually transmitted disease, which is a load of rubbish anyway if you actually read up on it. People can be born with HPV viruses. This is something that it is really strange, because they're also giving it to very young girls that actually haven't had sex or are very unlikely to have sex for a few years. I mean, I know the sort of the age range has gone down, to have sex nowadays, and it's sort of 14 or 15 seems to be the average age, which is quite appalling. I think that they should be teaching, actually, instead of handing all these vaccines out and birth control pills and everything else at school these days, which they can, they should be educating girls morally and not to sleep around. But there you go, that's just me. But the HPV virus can be picked up in so many different ways, and it's not just a sexually transmitted disease. And what we're being taught and shown, of course, is all misdirection to just have as many vaccines as they can possibly dish out. The HPV vaccine, is quite a dangerous vaccine, as you can see from my statistics, which I actually got from Jani's. Jani, she's a friend of a lot of professionals. I just know her as Jani. I can't remember her second name. I think it's Jani Stovus. She has been working on the VIA's website. That's a vaccine website. It's the Adverse Events Reporting System, and it's in the USA. And she's been working on there, looking through all the statistics, and it's her that's been getting all these statistics off for professionals and relaying what she's found to them. I got the particular list off Sane Vax's website. They do an awful lot of work, an awful lot of good work actually, on the HPV vaccines, getting the information out. There's a lot of young girls dying. The first case that I ever had any dealings with at all was from the Severax vaccine, which is the one they use in the UK, although they're now going to be using it, or are using it in the USA as well. And the first case I ever came into contact with, who contacted me through my website, asking me for help, was a young girl who she was 12 and had just had the vaccine. Within 48 hours, she become so ill. I mean, within 5 hours she was actually ill, but within 48 hours she was actually paralysed. She remained paralysed. She was taken to hospital. She had test after test, and she remained in hospital and paralysed for 2 years. She actually had she was incontinent. She had various different problems. She was constantly ill while she was in hospital. She ended up having so many different antibiotics. They couldn't do anything for her. She did gradually get better, and it seems that she actually had Guillain-Barré syndrome. Or Guillain-Barré, I'm not quite sure how they pronounce that. I always say Guillain-Barré. But that's what she was finally diagnosed with. However, during that period of time, her mother got accused of Munchausen's by proxy, because they said that she was coaxing her daughter to think that she was vaccine damaged. And little Ashley said to me, she turned around to me while she was in hospital, and I saw her in hospital. I got actually chucked out because I looked like a journalist. But she said to me, would I actually wet myself to prove a point? And I felt so sorry for her. She was given a psychiatric exam. She had to go through one assessment after another, as I say, including all the psychiatric assessments, to see if she was mad. And then because they couldn't find anything mentally wrong with her, they had to go at the mum, and eventually, as I say, she got accused of Munchausen's. And the case seemed to drag on and on and on. They did get cleared in the end. But that child went through hell, and her life was hell. And her mother had a nervous breakdown afterwards as well. She really did have a nervous breakdown because she couldn't cope. I mean, she was a single mum, and her daughter was very seriously ill. And that was from the Cervarix vaccine, which they say is perfectly safe, and every girl should have it. So it's a must-have thing.
Well, of course. I mean, somebody's put a comment in the box here about the cabbage looper moth DNA that's in the Cervarix. You aware of that? Yeah, I mean, if I don't know what effect that's supposed to have on young girls. Do they wake up in the middle of the night and gravitate towards the light bulb? I mean,
No idea.
I mean, for injecting, it's like any vaccine. We've got chicken organs and aborted fetal tissue and stuff in them. I mean, if you're injecting foreign DNA into your body, it cannot possibly be good for you. I think we'll go to our first piece of music, and then we'll come back. I'll talk about you were talking about their. Educating women instead of trying to cure this spurious thing called HPV that generally, as far as I'm aware, cures itself in most cases anyway, without a vaccine. There's an article appeared on an HIV vaccine that, which it's almost like giving license to people just we can't get HIV anymore. Let's just don't worry about it anymore. And go out and do it. I mean, are they going to create an HIV epidemic through a vaccine? That would be.
Well, they have already done that.
Well, of course, I know they did it in Africa, but we'll get onto that.
Did that.
Yeah, we'll get onto that later. To the Reality Bytes Radio on the. I'll look at the time there. I was going to say 20th. It's 20:28 p.m. on the 5th of December 2013. And I just want to mention that Alan Taylor Shearer will be on after this broadcast at 10 p.m. till midnight for his second show. I believe he went down very well last week, and I'm sure he'll keep up that standard. He's just sent me a message here, actually, just coincidence. But he's actually going to be continuing talking about vaccines on his programme. He's going to be talking about an anti-vaccine campaign. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the subject, to listening there, Alan's got his own things going on with that as well. So Christina, you talked earlier about educating women, not to be so promiscuous when they're young and all the rest of it. And I noticed today there's an HIV vaccine now being touted as the next best thing, So I mean, it's almost like saying to people, oh, you don't have to worry about it anymore. You can get a vaccine for it. I mean, and so just off you go. Because
I remember writing in one of my articles once, there's vaccines for absolutely everything. There's vaccines for just about everything you can think of these days. They're just one after the other sort of being dished out to children. I know there's 48 vaccinations are given altogether between the ages of, I think it's between the ages of birth and 18. If I'm right, that is 48 in the USA. It's a little bit lower in this country. in some countries it's a lot worse than that. I mean, I looked at them the other day, and the Indian vaccine table actually showed they give children eight different polio vaccinations between the age of birth, because they have the first one very, very young, and 5 years old. Why would anybody want 8 polio vaccinations for a disease that's supposed to be eradicated anyway?
Yeah, because they don't work. They've just got to keep giving them in the hope that they do work. But they've got to create an epidemic of polio to justify giving vaccines that don't work and actually cause polio. But we'll get onto that. We'll get onto that later. I wanted to. I should have mentioned this quote that was in that article regarding the HPV vaccine. An article by Heidi Stevenson. And she says, if you can push the most dangerous vaccines in use today on teen and pre-teen girls and later on boys of the same age without any proof that they work, then why not give them to newborn infants plus another booster later on? That appears to be planned for Gardasil and Cervarix, along with a slick new marketing program thanks to the vaccine industrial complex. Now that would imply that they're planning to, when they take the child away from the mother when it's born, and
they are.
Whatever they do with it, are they just going to inject it there and then, and the parents won't even know about it? I mean, is that what they're talking about here?
Well, I don't know whether they'll do it without the parents knowing about it. But I do know that it's planned for them to be given to babies. Why? I don't know.
Well, they've been taking blood from babies for the best part of 35 years or so, and put them in a DNA base without the parents' consent. So. They can seem to be able to do what they want as long as the door's shut and nobody can see them. But anyway, the HIV. I mean, I think most people who listen to this program believe or know for a fact that HIV has always been a created disease, and the target for it was poor Black Africans. And I don't think anybody listening to this program would disagree with that too much. I certainly believe it myself, and I've read enough on it to understand that Cold Spring Harbor and all these places in the States, the bioweapons labs were producing similar type infectious diseases around the same time. And if you want to eradicate a population because they're sitting on valuable resources, and just do it. If you're that way inclined, and I seem to think that's certainly what happened with HIV. And now to come out and say that there's a vaccine for it, I think is rather spurious. I think they need to create another pandemic of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean they created the first epidemic, or so-called epidemic of HIV and AIDS. So why not carry on and give them a vaccine for it now? I mean, there's so many things they're trying to give vaccines for. It seems like the right way to go for them. But it's just it's ridiculous. I mean, most people that are into the subject and are looking into vaccines seriously have heard the Hillman, interview video.
That's a guy from Merck.
Yeah, that's a guy from Merck laughing and joking about the monkeys, the green monkeys. So most people have heard that particular little interview and outburst by him. I mean, they've created the disease. That's how it came about in the first place, like so many other diseases. And now to give a vaccine for it, I mean, it's like everything else. If you look hard enough, all the support groups for all the different diseases and illnesses we have, mostly common vaccine injuries. I'm talking about things like epilepsy, ADHD, autism, whatever. You seem to find, well, certainly diabetes is one of them. You certainly find that the drugs companies are funding the support groups, and they're funding them to advertise, in a lot of the cases, advertise and support their drugs. So therefore, they create the disease in the first place and make a cure, or so-called cure, or something that will calm the symptoms down or whatever, to actually combat the disease that they made in the first place. So it's ridiculous. I'm particularly talking about Ritalin. That's the one I'm thinking of. Ritalin, the ADHD support group in. Sorry, I've got someone with me. The support group for ADHD, which is ADDIS, and that's the one in UK. That is a particularly well-known support group with well-known speakers and well-known people running it, and they actually are supported and financially supported a lot by Eli Lilly, and a lot of their drugs. And it's not just Eli Lilly; it's all the different drug companies, but Eli Lilly is particularly strong with them. And they seem to support all their drugs, every one of the drugs that these facts. If you look into it well enough, which I have a great deal, you can see that the particular drugs companies that they support that are supporting them the most and giving out. I mean, Eli Lilly, for instance, are giving out financial support for education programs and everything else, and these are very, very large amounts to support these children, which all seems very good and very noble of them. But in turn, the support group is sort of talking a lot in their talks and their lectures and things about the particular drugs that they use, that these different manufacturers actually have made. And I've looked into it a lot, so I actually have known a lot about this particular support group. They've got the sleep program. They did a big sleep study, and that was all supported and funded by Eli Lilly. And it's got Eli Lilly on the bottom, so I'm not actually making it up, and it can be checked and verified.
I don't know if you're aware of, possibly are, that the guy who invented the so-called disease of ADHD, Leon Eisenberg, on his deathbed said it was essentially a fictitious disease, basically designed to sell drugs. I mean, how many other diseases have been fictitiously created or labelled to do similar?
Many, and of course, a lot of the mental illnesses are just the opinions of psychiatrists. The psychiatrists, of course, they look at a group of symptoms, give their opinion to what it is, and that's what you'll get the drug for, what they think it is. And every disease, every sort of mental illness that the psychiatrists have made up, all the DSM-5 and everything else that we see, they're all just made up through what their opinions are. There's no actual scientific tests or anything else that they could actually do to find out whether, there's no sort of imbalance in the brain to show this particular thing or whatever. So they haven't got any scientific evidence. It's all a matter of opinions. And,
I actually saw a clip from the start of a documentary. I can't remember who made it, but they were interviewing the psychiatrists. I'm going to put that in inverted commas. Psychiatrists actually going into the venue, and they were asking them what they thought of psychiatry as science, and not one of them would admit that it was. And they actually didn't call themselves scientists; they called themselves psychiatrists. Yet it's portrayed as a valid science to diagnose mental illness, and it's nothing of the sort. It's a totally fictitious career, or it's bogus. The whole thing's bogus.
Yeah, it is, and a lot of the illnesses and things they, giving out these drugs for, and they're giving out hundreds of different drugs for different, these diseases that, are supposed to exist, that, and illnesses and syndromes and everything else that don't actually exist. And this is a very dangerous practice because, they're making an awful lot of money out of it. I mean, I've actually read a story fairly recently, I bet it's probably a couple of years ago now, but of a 1-year-old being given Ritalin, prescribed Ritalin by his GP and psychiatrist because he was crying a lot. Nobody ever got to the bottom of why this child was crying and screaming so much, but he was given Ritalin to shut him up. And I thought that was terrible.
I mean, if they'd had all this stuff going on when I was at school, I'd have been right down to the psychiatrist on a number of occasions for any number of fictitious illnesses, because I was just a typical boy of my day and ran about the classroom and caused mayhem. But that's what boys do. But
it's a lot of what boys do, and you've got to look at what's normal behaviour and what's abnormal behaviour. And I think if somebody's got a child with so-called ADHD or behaviour problems, whatever you like to call it, you know about it. You really do know about it. And they're trying to jump over bridges and everything else. They're totally out of control. They've got no conscience, no sort of. There's no control in them. They've got no right and wrong. They don't understand that right and wrong. And this is, of course, probably is a part of the brain that's affected. But, nobody's ever gone into it in that much depth. It's just, we'll give this drug, we'll give that drug, we'll try this combination, do this, that, and the other. And, of course, a lot of these neurological conditions, whatever they are, whether they're being made up by psychiatrists or whatever, there are a lot of neurological conditions which are coming out of the vaccines. One of my articles that I've written on VacTruth is about government documents, secret government documents that have been hidden away for 30 years on the measles vaccine and the SSPE, which is a neurological disorder. And the government, especially the UK government, had been talking in depth in meetings and actually had a particular group of top doctors and specialists looking at the fact that the measles vaccine was causing the SSPE. And they were very, very worried about it. And this was in the 1972, that kind of period of time. They were exceptionally worried about it, worried enough to make a group for this particular disorder. And I've got it all about that, and I've actually got some of the papers from they're archived papers. They were actually given to me by mistake, more for them. I went down to the archives in Kew looking for one thing, and because on the way I got told that wasn't needed to do anymore. Don't worry, Christina, don't worry about getting that. It was Dr. Vera Schreibner, she wanted something. And I thought, well, I don't want to waste a journey. I was nearly there, and I thought, well, what can I look for? And I remember Dr. Rebecca Carley, a very, very good doctor and a very valued friend of mine. I'd sort of been speaking about, the measles vaccine causing SSPE, and I thought, well, I can just have a look and see. And on the sort of catalogues they have on the computer screens, they have all these different files and folders you can look at. And I ticked a few that I thought I liked the look of, that sort of had things that possibly would relate to it. And I didn't look at the dates of when they were supposed to be released. These papers were supposed to be released in these particular folders. I just asked for the folders, and down they came in the chute, through on the lift and everything else, and into my slot. And I went and had a look at the papers. And on the front of these papers, it said, "Do not release until 2075." And there I was with my little sticky fingers looking through them, thinking, wow, what's all this going on? And I've actually put two of the papers on VacTruth in this particular article. I can give you the link at some time. It's a very, very interesting article, and it actually shows exactly what they're saying and have been saying for years. And the thing is that the SSPE is actually... it actually causes death. It's a neurological disorder that causes a various number of symptoms, including memory loss and various behaviour problems and things, very similar to autism, but these children die. And
just to clarify what SSP is, I've just looked up
I
here.
can't say
Subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which is a debilitating and progressive brain disorder. Just to clarify that, because people might know what it is.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry.
I
tend to say just SSPE because I can't say it. So thank you for that. Yeah, and this the thing is that it didn't change. And Dr. Rebecca Carley's been saying this for years. She said, that it's being caused by the MMR. And the situation didn't change, because when they actually combined the vaccines and put them into the MMR, it still continued. And they were still talking about it and worrying about it during the meetings, and I have got some of these documents on my website, the meetings that it was involved in, and they were talking about it, although I did speak in depth on the article in Back Truth about what exactly they were saying about it and who was saying what to who. And it didn't change, and only they were saying that when it changed over to the MMR from the single vaccines to the MMR, that the measles vaccine in the MMR was causing a SSP-like syndrome, and it wasn't killing the children, but it was very, very similar. The actual symptoms were very similar, and Rebecca Carley had always said that this was the actual autism. This was what she believed was autism. And when you look at it, and you look at what Rebecca Carley was saying, and I've got this all on this article, and what is actually the government was saying in the JCVI meetings, Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisations, and various other different meetings that they were having, they were actually discussing this, and it was a SSP-like syndrome. And you know, Rebecca Carley never had seen those documents. I'd actually given her the whole folder with all the stuff that I found. And you're allowed to take photos of the documents, and you're allowed to order documents from the Q archives. You're not supposed to ever sort of publish these documents. However, there is a clause on there that Back Truth has used, which actually says you can publish them if it's for educational purposes, and that's why we've put it on, because we feel it's very much educational, and parents should know and should be made aware of what's going on within our governments. And why should papers be locked away for 30, 40, 50, 60 years? It's ridiculous. Why can't parents have this information?
Because we're not supposed to have it, because it's a secret.
No, exactly.
Anyway, I just got a question from a very good friend of mine in my Skype box. You briefly mentioned diabetes earlier. In your opinion, do vaccines cause diabetes? And if so, is it both types, or is it one or the other?
I believe so, yes. There's
both types?
Type 1 and type 2.
Okay.
I know Marcus Hines, he's written on Back Truth, so if anybody wants to go on to Back Truth and have a look, if you go into any article and then go up to the top into the toolbar and click on the writers, if you just sort of scroll down, you'll see Marcus Hines, and he's got a daughter that became diabetic straight after a vaccine. And he writes about her. He's written an amazing book, which I've actually got, about this child and about all the things that have happened to him and happened to the child since she had the vaccine, and what actually, his beliefs and what he's found out. And he's actually written an article I think he's written about 2 or 3 now on Back Truth, and does explain it in great detail. Parents really should read these articles, because they're amazing, and they do talk about exactly what these vaccines can do, and about his own experiences and what his research has shown him. I haven't particularly researched it in great detail. I just know of his work and what he says. Okay.
Well, we'll go to another piece of music, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the stuff affecting another friend of mine, the same friend actually, regarding them being pressurised into taking vaccines in the workplace, and articles are now starting to appear in the paper along the same lines. But we'll come on to that after the next piece of Reality Bytes Radio. I'll just mention again, Anthony Taylor-Shearer will be on after this broadcast at 10 o'clock, and he'll be continuing this vaccine anti-vaccine scheme that he's involved in. And next week we'll have Bill Still talking about money, that the root of all evil and all that kind of thing. Christina, there's a friend of mine has an email from her work. I'm not going to mention where she works or anything like that, but basically encouraging them to get the flu vaccination. Now, this is from a company called H&G Healthcare, And when you can't find anything on their site about who they are, but you can trace them back to HG Finance or Investments, I think. And basically, it's an investment company run by bankers, and they're into pharmacology, renewable energy, windmills, you name it. They're into surveillance equipment, all sorts of that kind of nefarious kind of industries. And there's an article now appeared in I think it's the Independent. Yeah, the Independent. I don't have a date on this actually. I do, 19th of November. So it's just a couple of weeks ago. Britons should be given vaccination record cards and be advised it is their civic duty to get immunised. Experts recommended on Tuesday. Experts, nameless experts, of course, warned that increasing migration, an ageing population, and the growth of antibiotic resistance is increasing the threat posed by infectious diseases. So it's now become a duty to have yourself injected with Bill Gates' toxic products.
Yep, that's right. And they're also, I'm going off the subject slightly, they're also actually, we've apparently got to, well, it's coming into force soon. The AMA have brought it in America. I've been talking about it. There is an article I've done on it on Vac Truth. They're saying that we've got to be subjects to test vaccines. So when they're testing a vaccine, we have to, if we don't want to be tested and used as guinea pigs, basically we have to sign a form to say whether we do or whether we don't. If we don't sign the form for some reason, or our children bring one of these forms home and parents don't see it and don't sign it, they'll be used as guinea pigs, or will be used as guinea pigs because we've given our passive consent regardless to what we want. They said this is because there's not enough people coming forward to be tested for new vaccines and test vaccines, and it's imperative that these vaccines are tested on humans first, or before they go out into the public. And so they're just sort of going to pluck people, a bit like the jury service, and they actually mentioned the jury service in the article that I was talking about on Vac Truth, and saying, well, it's a duty, you're not allowed to if you're called up for a jury service, you're not allowed not to go into the jury service. You've got to do the jury service. It's your duty to do that, and that's it's our duty, and not enough people are coming forward. Well, can you blame them? I mean, thinking what's going in the vaccines and what the vaccines are coming out for. Does anybody want to be a guinea pig? Who's going to sign these forms to say that they're going to go forward to be guinea pigs? But apparently this is what we've got to do, and you've got to sign the form if you don't. That's it. You've got to sign the form if you don't want to have it. You don't want to be a guinea pig. A bit like what they're going to be doing for the kidney donors and everything else,
Yeah. Well,
it's being forced on us, basically.
Yeah. The crux of this article, it comes round about the middle of it. And I'll read out the title so people can read it themselves. I mean, the whole article is kind of just selling the vaccines, but I'll get to the crux of it in the middle of it. It's called "Getting Vaccinated is a Civic Duty," warn health experts. Right, but in the middle of this article, it says immunisation prevents between 2 and 3 million deaths a year. Well, for a start, if there are a million out on a range of 2 to 3 million, the research isn't very good, are they? Is it?
Not really, no.
According to the World Health Organization, that very benevolent organisation that's been involved in all sorts of corruption to do with pharmaceutical companies,
and Bill Gates.
And Bill Gates, of course. Recently, we'll get to him in a minute. I know you're keen to get to him, and so am I, because he's a despicable character. But recent research points to the cost-effective nature of vaccinating older adults. Now, older adults, they don't put an age range on that, but I'm presuming these are working adults, because the next line says, in a recent study in the Netherlands, it was estimated that for every €1 invested in adult vaccination from the age of 50, so yeah, they're still working, €4.02 of future economic revenue could be generated. So they've got to keep them alive. They want to stick a needle in them. And I think, call me cynical, but possibly this is going to kill them earlier so they don't receive a pension, and that's where the savings are coming in. It's got nothing to do with them paying taxes for a little bit longer or anything like that. It's the savings on them not claiming their pensions as they get older. That's what I take from this article, because there's no other reason for that passage being in there.
Well, very possible. I mean, they are making a lot of particularly the healthcare professions, have the vaccines regardless. It is a condition of their employment now. Hospitals, even receptionists in hospitals, porters, people that bring around the dinner trolleys, all sorts. They're all going to be having to be vaccinated with flu vaccines. They have to have vaccinations up to date. So this will be the range of everything. I should imagine the MMR will be included. Well, that's included in everything. The everything going. I mean, the DPT, tetanus, everything, And then, of course, they go one further and have the Hep B, which is one of the most dangerous vaccines there is. Hep B. And then they bring in, there's a new one, I think, for hepatitis A. I think it's hepatitis A. There's a new one for that now. And so it'll be one after the other vaccines to be brought in for these workers because, they've got to be fully vaccinated because, you don't want to pass it on to the patients. And, of course, they're not passing it on to the patients. If anybody passes the diseases on, it'll be the vaccinated people. Because more vaccinated people are having the diseases that they've been vaccinated from than anything else. I mean, whether it's measles or any of them. I mean, you've only got to take the example of the flu vaccine, but, these vaccines don't work. Children are getting measles that have had the MMR. They're getting whooping cough. I mean, my own child's an example of that because Nicky was my younger one. He was fully vaccinated when I got him. What I believe and what I do now is totally different. But when I had Nicky, he was fully vaccinated. And I don't suppose I'd have changed anything if what had happened to me hadn't happened to me. Because, like everybody else, I believe the doctors were good and the doctors, advised something, you did it. Government advised something, you did it. It was just what I thought. And, he actually had the worst case of whooping cough that I could ever imagine. I mean, he really, really was ill. And they diagnosed him as asthmatic, as having asthma. And he was a child whooping and bringing up all this gunge off his chest.
Yeah, just to clarify, whooping cough is pertussis, yeah?
Pertussis, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Just on that, you were talking about measles earlier. I phoned up I think it was the South Wales Health Board when they were pushing the MMR vaccine at this latest outbreak, as they called it. Yeah. And I phoned them up and I recorded it. I've got that recording somewhere. And I asked the lady on the phone how many of the cases coming forward had been previously vaccinated, and she said we don't keep that kind of information. I said, but surely you must know if these people have been vaccinated because you must ask them that question when they come in. We don't have any records of that nature.
They'd have had seen the vaccination cards and everything.
Of course they would. So I'm going to do a follow-up on that because it's all kind of been brushed under the carpet now. So I'm going to do an FOI request and try and get some real information out of them on that basis and see what they come back with. Because they're liars, basically.
Well, they're liars anyway, because there was I think there was only ended up being one actual case of measles that came out of all that, and it was just media hype, and they'd gone ahead and said that they'd had all these cases of measles, and they were suspected measles cases, not real measles cases. There was only one real measles case in that period.
Wouldn't you think if there was an epidemic of measles, the best thing to do would be to stay at home rather than form big lines outside them, vaccination units?
Yeah, I mean, that was so stupid. All those little tiny children being brought up to these vaccination clinics having these vaccines. And, there was a measles epidemic around, and any one of those parents could have been carrying the virus anyway.
Exactly. Well, I mean, this brings us on to another story that came out 20th October 2013. Exclusive in big bold letters. This is an Express. Jab to end superflu. Holy Grail vaccine will give lifetime protection.
Nice. We've only had it once, just kill you outright.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the case. Yeah, but we're always told that if you got vaccinated once, it was for life anyway. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I mean, now of course you don't. The
No.
DPT is another example of that. I mean, the DPT, you're supposed to sort of have your 3, and that's it. You know, well, I mean, when I was young, that's what we had, 3, and now you have to have it at I think it's 13, 16, and then you have another one when you're an adult as well. And it just goes on and on and on. And they're saying, oh, you know, you're not protected. There's not, you know, it doesn't carry on the protection. Well, it's supposed to have done when I was a child. You know, I never had any extra ones, and I'm not planning on any.
No, I've never had one since I left school. And, you know, I take my vitamins and I try and eat as healthy as possible. Sometimes I slip up, of course, the same as everybody else. But, you know, I've never had a cold or a flu for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. You know, just, and, you know, I've been in contact with people who've had colds and flus, but I've never got it. But anyway, I mean, the Holy Grail vaccine, I mean, I don't think anybody found the Holy Grail anyway, so I mean, I don't know why there's a link with that. But
I think it's just media hype, isn't it? It's the way they do it.
Absolutely. But they're taking another approach now, and this is the BBC, that bastion of truth and honesty, if I can get this thing up. Well, that article's just disappeared off my screen. How's that? Anyway, the title is TB Vaccine Could Help Prevent MS. Now, you know,
oh, right. So going to vaccinate you for that now, are they?
Yeah, they must have found that out by accident, you know. Just happened to pop up in some test. Here we go. TB vaccine could help prevent MS. An anti-tuberculosis vaccine, and it doesn't say which one, could prevent multiple sclerosis, early research suggests. The Sapienza University of Rome has raised hopes that the disease can be warded off when early symptoms appear. More research is needed before a BCG vaccine can be trialled on MS patients. So they want to trial it on people who are sick already.
Yeah, well, that just kill them off. A bit like Eli Lilly with their thimerosal trials. You go down the page, it goes, after 5 years, and they trialled this on 33 people. I mean, this is the size of the test they did, 33 people. And another 40 individuals were given a placebo. So they've tested it on 33 people, and 30% of those who received the placebo had not developed MS, compared with 58% of those vaccinated. So 58% of 58% of 33. It's about 17, 18 people. Not very many. I'm not very good at maths.
Well, I'm just picking up. But it's, you know, we're talking less than the number of fingers and toes you have. That's the basis of the research. It's just ridiculous. The law of averages are that they could come up with those figures anyway. Had
any of those already had the TB vaccine?
Well, it doesn't say that either. But I'm sure they must have. I'm sure they must have had. I'm sure they must have had when they were children.
Yeah, they must have done. Most of them did. I mean, this is it. The tests. Certainly the stuff I've seen. Well, I saw Paul Offit talking out of his back of his head as usual. You know, speaking about the vitamins and minerals and things, and he was saying, you know, they could cause this and they could cause that. But if you looked at the studies that he was actually had stated in this particular article, and he was referring to and referencing in articles he'd written in the New York Times, they didn't make sense. The articles didn't make sense because the trials, there was unbalanced trials. I mean, you know, he used all smokers for one of his tests, looking into how many would die of cancer that had vitamins compared to those that didn't have vitamins. And you know, an awful lot of them did die of cancer, but you know, no record. There was no record of how long these people had been smoking, or you know, how old they were, what other health problems they might have had or might not have had, you know. And his test subjects, the whole thing was flawed. The whole study was flawed right the way through. You know, there was no variables mentioned, nothing. And I mean, I've done a bit of psychology at college. I did the A level, and I know how to do a study and how not to do a study. And looking at the studies that he was referring to, they were ridiculous. The test groups were completely unbalanced. One was higher than the other. You know, you had the no control group at all, and you think, yeah, right, Yeah, and this is how most of the scientists seem to do their tests, and most of the studies are done. And if you're talking about saying that they're trying it on 33 people, and that amount of people got MS compared with the other group, placebos, it's not a big enough trial. If you're going to do something like that, do it properly. Or don't do it at all, as I would say.
Well, you need thousands. You need thousands. I mean,
that's it.
As simple as that. Anyway, we'll go into another piece of music, and we'll come back with. We've talked. We will get on to Bill Gates, I assure you. We'll talk about the government's vaccine damage scheme. They're telling us that vaccines are safe, so we'll talk about the vaccine damage scheme, which they want to give us money for damaging those vaccines, apparently. And for all those who've been vaccinated and you think you're perfectly safe and all the rest of it, welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio. Still got our guest Christina England with us, and we were talking off air about. We talked a lot tonight about vaccine damage and across a range of vaccines, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this tonight will be aware of the government's own vaccine damage payment scheme. The overview, as it is on their own site, and I think they've changed the site from the last time I looked at it, because it's very, very basic now. There used to be a bit more information than this, as far as I remember. But the overview states that if you're severely disabled, define severely for a start, disabled as a result of a vaccination against certain diseases, not against all of them.
No, not against all of them, no. Against
certain diseases, you could get, maybe, just possibly, a one-off tax-free payment of £120,000. This is called a vaccine damage payment. Now, when they call it a tax-free payment, it's very, very disingenuous, because the next part of the overview says the effect on other benefits. Now, as a taxpayer, you're entitled to these benefits. So to suggest that giving you an amount which could be maybe £120,000, and then to take money off you is in effect a tax. They're going to tax your other benefits by giving you this £120,000. The effect on your other benefits, it says, a vaccine damage payment maybe will affect other benefits and entitlements like. Now, there's a difference. The word benefits and entitlements, there shouldn't be any argument. They are a benefit for you, and you're entitled to them, regardless of whether they damage you with a vaccine or not. You should still be entitled to these other benefits. But they say it's going to affect your income support, income-based job seekers allowance, working tax credit, child tax credit, universal credit, pension credit, housing benefit, council tax reduction, employment and support allowance. The effect the payment will have depends on a number of things. This includes the payment being put into a trust and the payments being made from it. You should let the office that deals with your benefit or tax claim know if you've got a vaccine damage payment. You can get contact details from letters they have sent you. Now, this is a government department. I don't know why you have to inform them that you got a vaccine damage payment. I'm sure the government departments can speak amongst themselves and sort it out. But,
I'm sure they'd find out.
I'm sure they would, yeah. But the fact is, basically, if you go for a vaccine damage payment, they are going to crucify you and take every other benefit off you, or at least enough of it to make your life a hell, basically. And you've already been, if you get this payment, you've already been classified as severely disabled. So they're going to punish you even further by taking money off you. That shows you, anybody listening to this, the mentality of the people that write this kind of garbage, exactly what they think of you as a human being. They don't think of you as a human being, obviously. That's just my opinion. But there you go.
Right, I know quite a lot about the vaccine damage payment unit, purely because I've been working with a family that's been having dreadful trouble over MMR damage back in the sort of late 80s. I think she was one of the first children to ever have the MMR and was severely damaged. And what I've learned, and what I've actually written quite a few articles on it. You have to be over 60% disabled and to even be looked at in the first instant for a vaccine payment, for the damage payment. And the little girl that I well, she's an adult now, but the little girl that I was looking into, and I was trying to help, and I wrote numerous letters in disgust, actually, had been turned down because she wasn't disabled enough. That's purely what they said. She's not disabled enough. This little girl is profoundly deaf in one ear. She's had numerous problems. Okay, being deaf in one ear compared with somebody that's severely autistic. But they work out all of the payments on the industrial injury payment plan and payment sort of scheme. So how can you compare a child that's damaged, say, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 18 months by a vaccine, and compare that to an industrial injury? Perhaps somebody's lost a limb in a piece of equipment or something like that. But this is what they do, and this is the idea of it all. It's all taken on this industrial injury scheme. Well, it's very, very hard to get a payment anyway, as this particular family's found out. They never have had a payment. I think one of the only children or adults now that I've heard of that has actually got a payment from this unit is the Jackie Fletcher's son, and he is very, very disabled indeed. And she's Jackie Fletcher from Jabs, who's runs the sort of campaigning website Jabs in the UK. It's very, very difficult indeed to get this. And then when you do get it, if you're on benefits, you'll have it taken away. It's very similar to, I'm on the carer's allowance because I've got 2 disabled boys that I care for full time. Well, one of them's full time, the other one's sort of part time. But I only get one payment anyway. You don't get a payment for each child you've got disabled. You could have 6, but you'll only get one payment. This payment's only £58 a week. In dollars, that would be something like, I don't know, 100. I think it's about $100 a week for looking after these 2. In Nikki's case, very severely damaged little boy. Now, I get that is classed as earnings from my income support, which I get. I get a part of an income support. I don't get full income support anyway, because of the fact that I do various different work on internet, and I get paid a little bit from it, which is all declared and everything to keep myself nice and safe. In case anybody's listening out there, it's all declared. So I'm actually, my carer's allowance is taken, also part of that is taken away from me on the income support, and that's how it works. It's classed as a wage or an earnings or whatever. The fact that you've got a very severely damaged child who you've got to look after for life, and let's face it, £120,000 isn't very much. It would probably keep an autistic child in a proper boarding school for maybe a year, in a boarding school for autistic children. I think one of their placements a year is £120,000. No, hang on, that's not right, is it? Sorry. I think it is actually. That's right. I know that it's exceptionally expensive in these boarding schools. I mean, we're talking about the profoundly disabled people and disabled children. I remember my own child. I looking at the placements, and they were exceptionally expensive. 5 years maybe. I don't know. I can't remember the actual payments. But it wouldn't keep a child in having a full-time carer, for instance, for very long, maybe a year, not very long at all. So £100,000 isn't very much, but then to have it taken off, be penalised because you're having this benefit from all your other benefits, if you're getting housing benefit to help you with your house or whatever. So all you're doing is you're changing one benefit for another and calling it a vaccine damage payment, because your child's vaccine damaged, and it makes you feel good at the time. But if you're going to lose all the other different benefits, you've got this very severely disabled child which you're trying to look after, you're going to feel, at least the government's helping. At least they've noticed that I have got a disabled child and it was vaccine damaged. In Katie's case, the child, Katie was damaged, and actually was deaf in one ear. They said if she'd been deaf in 2 ears, that would have counted, but she wasn't deaf. She was only deaf in one ear, and whereas 2 ears would be 100% disabled, that's what they class it as. 60% is not, she's only one ear, so it's not even 60%. We said, well, surely if it's 100% disabled, if you've got complete and utter deafness, by having being deaf on one side, profoundly deaf on one side, would be 50%. Oh no, it doesn't work out like that, they said. And we wrote numerous letters. We've been to MPs. We've done absolutely everything we can, because of course the MPs are next to useless anyway. But we thought we'd give it a go and do all what we had to do. And she never did get her payment, and she's still fighting to this day. She's even taken the lawyers to court as well that she used, because they lumped her case in with all the cases that were going in the UK forward for autism. And her case got lumped in. Katie hasn't got autism. She's never been autistic. She's quite an intelligent girl. She just has the deafness. But because they wanted to make it a sort of bulk group of people and get as many possibly as they could, I think they took 120 to court in the end, to try and get justice and payments and everything else. And they took the children all went and they did a big joint case, and Katie got lumped in with that. She wasn't, because she was using the same group of lawyers, and so I think they went ahead and actually sued the lawyers. But Katie Stevens' case, benefits wouldn't have come into it. But there's a lot of people out there that have lost jobs because they've got disabled children, and are only not working because they have to look after these children because they're so desperately damaged from these vaccines. And yet they're penalising those very children and their families, and that have lost everything anyway, and have lost the child that they thought they were going to have. And the child's lost a life. They've lost a chance of marriage, a chance of a future, careers and everything else. And one particular family I know in the UK, she's an amazing woman. She's actually gone outside Parliament dressed in a child's nappy because her child was so vaccine damaged from the MMR that he is still in nappies and he's 15. And that was what she was trying to explain, that this child had been so severely damaged. And it was, they got a lot of people with damaged children all outside Parliament wearing nappies, diapers, whatever, and to complain against the government and what they were doing. Not that it made any difference, of course, but...
Well, not... I mean, what reaction did you get from MPs?
I didn't get anything at all. She got a few letters.
Yeah, I've been to MPs on different issues. I've been to Gavin Shuker in Luton South, I think he is, and he's supposedly on the child trafficking committee, and I laid evidence before him about child trafficking and child sex abuse, and at that point he asked me to leave. So that's how interested they are. But I think they're just gatekeepers. Anybody. I don't know if it was MPs with a particular interest in the medical profession you went to see, but as far as I'm aware, anybody that's on any of those committees is a gatekeeper for that industry. And
definitely.
They're a barrier. That's all they are. They're not there to help you whatsoever.
It's all misdirection and rubbish. They're not interested in your child. They're not interested in you. I remember Nick Gibb is my MP in the area I'm in, and he was very, very helpful until the Conservatives got in, and he was a Conservative MP. And once he got in, he was very rude in his letters. He didn't answer letters properly and everything else, and I just gave up. I won't be writing to him again. This is what happens. They only want you for your votes, and once you've given your vote, I don't vote anymore because I don't believe in and I'll never vote again in any other election. And I just don't believe in governments, Parliament, anything now. It's all a load of rubbish. And the children actually aren't yours anyway, because you've actually registered your child at birth because you're told to register them. That's what you're meant to do. And of course, you're just registered and you're just signing them over to the government. And now the government own the children. We all think our children are ours, but they're not, are they?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Anyway, we'll go to another tune and then we'll come back and talk about everybody's favourite philanthropist, Mr. Bill Gates.
Yeah.
The man who everybody loves to hate, I suppose.
Lovely guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
Welcome back to Reality Bytes at 9:30 p.m. in the UK on the 5th of December 2013. Now, we'll go on to the world's, I suppose, most publicised so-called philanthropist, Mr. Bill Gates. And if anybody doesn't know the history of Bill Gates, they need to look into his father, who was William Gates Sr., I think his name was, who founded Planned Parenthood along with Margaret Sanger. And of course, Margaret Sanger, if you're looking at Margaret Sanger, you'll find out exactly what she thought of, in particular, black babies, black children. And if anybody thinks that Bill Gates is out in Africa giving vaccines to black babies to save them, on one hand, while on the other hand, he's talking about overpopulation. The two don't go together. You don't go out and try and save people's lives and then stigmatise that group of people as being overbreeding Neanderthals, which is basically what he's saying. He also gets up on a stage and says we can decrease the population by the use of vaccines and contraception, basically. What he means by contraception is forced sterilisation, I think. And him and his colleagues go to the Good Club, Warren Buffett and Oprah Winfrey, you know, that nice lady that goes on television and says she's helping people.
Lovely lady.
That nice lady, yeah. The Good Club, you should look that up. Along with Mr. Rockefeller, who had the displeasure of meeting briefly in a hotel in Dublin and confronting him briefly before getting out quickly before I was shot. But yeah, Bill Gates. I believe I've not found any evidence of this, but I've heard it from a good source that Bill Gates' father was actually brought in as the PR man for the Rockefeller family after they went out and shot a load of miners for basically having the temerity to ask for proper housing and shelter when they were camped out in tents in a muddy field mining. I can't remember if it's coal or some kind of metal at one of the Rockefellers' mines, when he just got his local militia and shot a load of them down. But I think Bill Gates' father was put in as the PR man to make Rockefeller, not the current Rockefeller, his father, a philanthropist and recreate him as this, really nice bloke who went out and helped the poor, you know. But yeah, that's Bill Gates' background and his father. And if anybody thinks Bill Gates is a genius, you only have to look at some of the videos where he's been asked a pertinent question on eugenics and stuff, and you'll see how much of an idiot this man really is. He never had anything to do with creating Microsoft. He was given all that, and he's been allowed to steal every patent from every other proper guy, scientists, call him what you will, living in his bedroom, coming up with programs and all the rest of it, and he's stolen the whole lot of it, along with Steve Jobs at Apple, same thing. But yeah, Bill Gates, his big drive now to eradicate polio. Even although in many cases it was already eradicated before he got there, and now there are epidemics of polio everywhere this guy goes. You were telling me a story there before we go into the his current drive. There's been cases going back as far as 2008, 2009 in Africa, 2008 even, where the polio vaccine has been cited even by the World Health Organization because they couldn't possibly avoid it because there was too many independent tests done, and they proved that it came from the vaccine. Even they have to admit that polio epidemics have been created in places like Nigeria and other West African states, where the World Health Organization and so-called NGOs linked to them, supposedly going out there as charities and all the rest of it to help the poor Africans. Bill Gates is behind all this, and Gavi, who he promotes heavily and puts a load of money into. Money he's seconded from stealing all the patents, of course. But yeah, Bill Gates, polio is his big thing. I wonder how long it's going to be before he starts coming over to the UK and say, well, there's been a few cases of polio. We might have to start doing this over here as well. It's not just Africa we need to be getting rid of. It's you poor white folk as well. But I mentioned the polio and Bill Gates and eradicating people because you put an article up the other day there on Back Truth. We've reposted it again on Sovereign Independent UK. Bill Gates' polio vaccine program eradicates children, not polio. Now,
yeah,
it
does.
At your leisure.
Yeah, it was a great title. I thought of that one myself. Jeff, actually, the person that does the vaccines, the website Back Truth, he actually does most of the titles, but I thought of that one up because of what was going on. They use it. Bill Gates is using out in Africa and India the OPV, which is the oral polio vaccination, which is a little drop. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of sort of people around my age would remember getting a nice little lump of pink sugar at school. That was the polio vaccine. And this particular OPV that they've been using is banned in the USA. Nobody can have it in the USA now because there's been so many cases of polio after children have had this particular vaccine that they've banned it in the America. Sorry, I was looking at something. Yeah, in America. And it's a vaccine. What happens to a lot of these vaccines, if they're banned or suspended in one country, they'll disappear into the third world. And this happened to Plusrex, the MMR as well, the banned one that was banned in the UK and banned in Canada and Japan as well, actually. And the same has happened to the polio. The polio has been banned in the Western world, so they've taken it over. They took it, shipped to the third world, and UNICEF and all the other organisations, all funded by Bill Gates and working in conjunction with Bill Gates, are giving them to all these children out in India and Africa. The article I actually wrote with that title was mainly looking at Indian children because there's been 47,500 cases of vaccine-induced polio. And since they've took the vaccine out there. Now, this is a particular type of polio, and it's induced by the vaccine, and it's called vaccine-induced polio. It's got various other names, but that's the one that the CDC were using, because incidentally the CDC had written all about it on their website, tucked away in cyberspace. I just happened to come across it by accident. I wasn't even looking for polio and CDC. I was looking on CDC for something else, and that came up on their website, and I thought, now that's interesting. And they were actually saying, that it could cause permanent brain damage and paralysis and various other things they were saying. And then I found this was being said by quite a few people, and the paralysis that the children are getting from the vaccine leads to the death of most of them, because they're in poor living conditions. They've got poor nutrition, poor sanitation, and everything else in the little tiny villages and ghettos in Africa that they usually them in, and the little tiny villages in India where all these little children are lined up, and all these kind of beautiful, wonderful people like Save the Children and UNICEF and Bill Gates Foundation and everything else are offering all these free vaccines to these children and saying we're going to eradicate polio across the world, and they're not doing anything like it at all. What they're doing is actually getting rid of one thing and causing another, which is exactly the same, because the vaccines cause what they're being given to prevent, and this goes right across the board, but polio in particular. And the oral polio is one of the worst, and after 47,500 in the last year had actually gone down with his vaccine-induced polio, and so he's telling everybody that he's eradicated wild polio. Well, yeah, okay, we'll give him that one. We'll say he's got rid of wild polio, although it'd gone years before he even came on the scene. But give him that. There's no wild polio out there. Instead, he's got the vaccine-induced polio, which is called AFP. I think it's AFP. I don't know what that stands for. But a lot of the organisations are calling it vaccine-induced polio, so that's what I'll call it, vaccine-induced polio. And so all he's done is he's taken away one thing and given them the same thing and called it something else, which is done over and over and over with vaccine adverse reactions to vaccines. That they'll take it one thing, say, I think rubella is a particular one, rubella, and they call it slap cheek, and the children are coming out with rubella.
Yeah, maybe VIP stands for very important polio.
Probably.
But of course, I mean, polio was rebranded as aseptic meningitis a number of years ago, and they claimed then that the amount of cases of polio had radically reduced, and just coincidentally, the cases of aseptic meningitis had increased by the same amount. So now they have to bring out a vaccine for meningitis, of course.
But this is what they've done in Africa.
Exactly. This is your next story.
Top topic for conversation.
This is your next story about
because I actually found
forced vaccination.
This is a really, really interesting one because in January, a guy from Africa emailed me through my website, which is profitableharm.com. That's profitableharm.com, all one word, for obvious reasons. He got hold of me through my website, and he said to me, "Can you help us at all? We've just had a case of 500 children in our little tiny village in Africa were vaccinated with this vaccine, and it was a test vaccine, it was a trial vaccine, and parents weren't informed, they didn't give consent, they didn't know anything about it at all. They were locked into a school and forced vaccinated, being told that if they didn't have the vaccine, they weren't allowed to continue their education program. And this was all run by the Bill Gates Foundation." So I said, "Have you got any proof on this?" Very interesting, because he said 106 had gone ill and 40 were paralysed and had been taken to hospital. So I said, "Have you got any proof of this?" I said, "Because I can't write about something unless I've got proof." "Oh, yes," he said, "we've got a newspaper, but it's in Guru and it's not on the internet." So I said, "Well, have you got the article? Can you give me a copy of the article?" Sure enough, he sent me a copy of the article. One of his relatives lived in this tiny village. It's in Chad, in northern Africa, and had been locked in the school, and he was now paralysed. And this was why this guy had tried to find me, because he'd read a lot of my articles. So anyway, I looked at this article, and because I don't read French, so I got a translator that I know, Desiree Rover, who's a brilliant lady and a great big anti-vaccine campaigner. She, translated it for me, and then she said, "Yeah, sure enough, it said this, that, and the other." So I went to Jeff and I said, "Can we do anything? I've got this, this information." And he said, "Well, we'll do some kind of story." And we did a story saying 40 children had been hospitalised in Najima. It was the vaccination was called Menafrac. It was a vaccination for meningitis A, and it was one that they were testing to see if it would go across the cold chain and not need refrigeration and could withstand very hot temperatures. That was the idea of the vaccine. It being made by the Serum Institute of India. And the vaccine had been funded completely by the Bill Gates Foundation. It was backed by the WHO and PATH and all these other organisations that were involved within it. Anyway, I put this story out, and it got a massive number of hits, obviously because nobody had ever heard of it. And then shortly after that, the guy from Africa emailed me again, and he said to me, "I've got a piece of footage of the Prime Minister going to see all these children who are paralysed and very, very ill. They're having enormous convulsions. They're convulsing. I mean, they became ill within half an hour to an hour of the vaccine, these children. And they're having to have 5 people hold these children down." And I said, "Well, have you got the piece of footage?" So he gave me the piece of footage. Sure enough, they had their Prime Minister. It was all in French, so I got a translator to translate it all for us. Sure enough, he was discussing it with, the medical people at the hospital. So I put that out onto Fact Truth, and we put the video and showed what was going on. And shortly after that, we were getting hits all over the place. I was getting accused of making it all up to get attention, usual thing. And I said, well, how could I make it all up? How could I get the Prime Minister of Chad to go into a hospital and look at all these children, take a film of him, all in French, which I don't understand anyway. I said, and get all these newspaper articles, which I'd got another article by then from the same newspaper. It was Le Vox. It was a newspaper that was in Chad, Africa. But it's not on the internet. However, it is now because I've put loads of my articles, I've got it in. Anyway, we heard that a little bit later that 7 of these children who were so desperately ill had been taken to Najima Airport. Najima Airport had been closed down, and because of what had been going on, they'd closed the airport down to the public altogether. They chartered a flight. No one knew, not the parents of the children, the 7 that were going over. They didn't know. They weren't told at all. They had no visas, nothing. They were given tickets. They got on this plane, and then they were told they were going to Tunisia. And the nurse that went with them had actually given us a lot of the information as well. And we had, by this time, got children's medical records as well, but had been smuggled out of the hospital by the African guy, which I've never mentioned his name, and I never will. This African guy that had been contacting me, and we literally went wild with the story. We put all the truth, and by this time we were chasing things up. Things were disappearing off the Serum Institute of India. What they were saying, they'd changed the information, but we had screenshots, so we put screenshots up to show that what they'd said was really true. And next thing I heard was that the Prime Minister of Chad and the Health Minister had both been relieved of their duties and replaced by other people. In other words, they both got the sack. And the reason they were given the sack was because the story leaked, and no one could find out how the story leaked. And it was all over the internet. Well, by this time, this article's had about 66,000 hits now. And that was the original one. And I've done 5 articles following this story up. Eventually, Bill Gates, in all his glory, dumped all these little kids, all back in the desert, all after they'd had all these tests and everything else. It was called mass hysteria. The children had all become hysterical after the vaccine and believing they were vaccine damaged for whatever reason. And they're still vaccine damaged to this day. They're still having fits. They came out in a dreadful rash from head to toe. They're very, very sick children indeed. They have no medical supplies, no doctors, nothing, out in this little village on the edge of the Sahara Desert. And sadly, they've been left there, dumped back in this village by Bill Gates, and he's gone goodbye and gone off and going and doing this to other children in other villages. I only got the story because somebody chased up after me and found me. And Fact Truth and Jeff was, kind enough to go with the story, even though we had very little evidence. But we did, in the end, we had countless evidence. We've got what the WHO have been saying, because all the flight was all, that was all by the WHO. They actually went to Tunisia, to a hospital in Tunisia. And we were told where they were going. Well, when they got there, we were told where they'd gone and everything else. And the WHO had chartered a plane. It's called Smedi in their country. They call it Smedi because they speak a couple of different languages. They speak French and can't remember. I think it's Arabic. I think that's the other language they use. I'm not quite sure about that. But I know they speak 2 languages, but the main language is French in Chad and Africa. And that's how we got hold of the story, and that's how it's on the internet today. It's still there. We've got a lot of children's medical records. We never ever printed the medical records, obviously, because that would be completely, against confidentiality. And you've got to protect the children at all costs, and that's what we try to do. However, we did put certain information from these records and what the WHO was saying and what, the different members of Parliament were saying out there. And they were basically trying to hide it up, and it was vaccine damaged. The children had been put down as vaccine damaged by the Menafrac vaccine, and that's why they were admitted into the hospital in Tunisia. And there was 20 other children on that flight from other place, another village. We don't know if they also had vaccine damage. They were also very ill and were evacuated for health reasons. But we don't know where they went or what happened to those. We never got the information. But it goes to show you just how humane, how wonderful this guy is. He can do all this, lock children forcibly into a school, force vaccinate them with the test vaccine, and then when they become very, very sick, treat them like animals. I mean, they were basically treated like animals and then dumped in the desert, and their parents have got to pick up the pieces, and they've got no help or anything.
Well, I mean, there's, the parallels are with what the Nazis did in the concentration camps. I mean, there is no difference. I mean, if people think that just because Bill Gates can get on CNN and smile at people and get all the publicity in the newspapers he likes when he's the people that back him on the newspapers anyway. To think that this guy is in some way, it's like the politicians. People think that dictatorship comes in the form of a uniform. We have it in this country with Cameron and his little cabal wearing their pinstriped Armani suits. There's no difference. There's no difference between Bill Gates and Joseph Mengele. There is no difference.
No, absolutely. No.
They're identical. I mean, it doesn't matter what they look like. Their actions speak louder than their words. And Bill Gates' words are bad enough.
We've got pictures of these children on VacTruth. The children's pictures were actually there because we were told that we were allowed to use them. We always get permission from whoever, and we were told that they were the guy that I'd got all the information from. They were relatives of his, and they'd given their permission. They've now managed to get a lawyer. We've been working very hard with various different organisations. One of the human rights organisations we've been working very closely with on this subject is Ecotora. And they've been wonderful, and they've put articles out. They put some of my articles out. They've done articles of their own articles. And I know the last time I actually met the guy from Africa in London at one point. He came over from Africa to do some work, but he also came over to meet me, and I went up to London and I met him. And we had dinner with him, a friend of mine and me. But a friend of mine works with me a lot and helps me. Yeah, he's Gary. You met him once when I did a lecture with you. Gary and I work closely together on all this, and he met up with us, had lunch. I don't go anywhere on my own. Gary always comes with me because of the work I'm doing is exceptionally dangerous, and I don't know what's going to happen to me, and I just keep going as long as I can because to try and help and protect children like these children. I'm doing an awful lot at the moment for 4 prisoners that have been had vaccine damaged children and have been locked up for murder. And one guy, he wrote to me. How he got my address, I don't know actually. So that was scary. He wrote to me last week or the week before, asking me to help him. He'd been imprisoned. He's got a life sentence, no parole, for the murder of his little boy. It's very clear that he didn't murder the child. There's one doctor, Dr. Ali Bayati, had written a fantastic report about this case, trying to get this guy an appeal. It was clear that the child was had very severe problems. He actually had a genetic illness and was dying anyway, and he had countless vaccinations before his death, and he died. And this guy got accused of shaken baby syndrome, which is a big thing at the moment. And as I say, I've got 4 fathers in prison and 1 family in court at the moment going on trial, both of them for murder of their little girl who clearly died of vaccine damage. And again, that article I did a big article on baby A. A lot of people who know me and know my work would know about the baby A case. She was 5 months old. She'd had 21 vaccines, and her little body couldn't take any more. And she swelled up like a balloon. I've got a picture of her on VacTruth. The articles, 5-month-old baby dies after vaccinations. Parents are on trial for murder. That's the actual article. And this little baby, you can see the face is like a balloon. Her eyes are bulging out of her head, and we've tried to disguise it a bit because the family's on trial. We hadn't used their name. It's baby A, and the family is Mr. and Mrs. A. We've done that because they're on trial for murder in South Africa, and who knows what's going to happen to them.
Well, of course, I mean, I remember you kindly gave me a copy of your book on the accusations made against people for shaken baby syndrome and caused by vaccines. And I'd advise anybody to go and get a little copy of that. It's not a big book. You'll get through it in a couple of days or a day. We've come to the end of the time, Christina, and
okay.
As the stories come in on vaccines, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of them because they just keep producing more of this toxic stuff to stick in people. So we'll get you back on a few months' time and do an update. Pleasure having you on, and
thank you very much.
No problem. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
I'll catch you tomorrow or the next day, and we'll have a chat again.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Bye, Neil. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.